This interview is part of the History Heard project. The content of this interview may be used for historical research. However, no part of the video itself may be reproduced without the express written permission of an authorized representative of History Heard or Eva Schaal. Today is January 10th, 2010 at 2 p.m. This is an interview with Eva Schaal in Sarasota, Florida. She was born on November 11th, 1922 in Berlin, Germany.
And fortunately then, the children's transport happened. And the way it was that you went on the train from Berlin or from Czechoslovakia and from Austria. There were also some trains. And in order to get on the train, on the children's transport, parents had to register their children at the Jewish, something like the Jewish Federation, if you know what that is. It's the Jewish organization here. I don't know whether you contacted the Federation to find out about it, because that's the place to do it. But if you want to find out somebody as a speaker. But anyway, the parents had to register that they want their children to go. And some children, they took the very poor children first, because there was a Jewish orphanage of 100-some-odd boys, only boys, and which the Jewish community had gotten because their parents were killed in concentration camps or terrible things happened to them. And they were the very first ones who got a chance to go to England with the children's transport. And there were 160 children, I think they were on the first transport. And my parents belonged to a Jewish organization, which is still in America, and it's B'nai B'rith. And the Jewish service organization where you help people, like many, many organizations here too. And my parents had, there was also in England, all of us all over the world. And the people from England said, oh, I have to tell you first how the children's transport started. It started in England, that the British people said, we should help the Jewish people to get into England. But there was a lot of unemployment in England, and they said we would only take people who don't take a job away from a British person, you know. So people could be gardeners or maids, people who'd never even cooked in the kitchen or cleaned because they had help. They would take maids, and they would take people like Frank. That's how he got out, because he already had a training as an electrician, a partial training, and they desperately needed people like that. So they said, these are the only people we would take out. And then there was a man called Lord Baldwin, who was was a former president of England. He was in the House of Parliament in England, and he said, well, if we can't take the Jewish adults out, except for very few, maybe we should save the children, and we should take the children out. But only if the British people will take the children into their homes or pay for them to be in England so that it does not become a burden to the British government. And they advertised all over, and a lot of Jewish organizations would say, well, we'll help the children. And a lot of Christians, more Christian than Jews, because there are many more Christians in England as Jewish people, and Catholics and people who were nothing, very poor people that say, we will help, and we take children into our home, or we pay for them depending upon what their circumstances were. And the British government had to get something like a lot of money to make sure that these children, to make a deposit of money also, so that the children one day would go back to their parents. They didn't know that so many parents would die in Germany, would go back to their parents or would go somewhere else in the world, but that their fear out of England would be guaranteed whenever necessary, okay? No rush on it or anything. So this is how the children's transport started. And then I don't know why the German government decided that they would allow the children's transport, but they decided it would be a nuisance for them to, at that time, to take care of so many children, and it would be just as well as they would leave without their parents. The British people said none of their parents can leave, only the children. And they were children from 6 months to 17 years, up to 16 was the last. Can you imagine parents and taking their little children who didn't understand why they were left by their parents, and let them go to England because they wanted to make sure that they saved their children's life, because it was so dangerous at that time after Crystal Night already that you didn't know what was going to happen and who would get out of Germany and who would not get out. And that's the German government made the condition that Jewish people who had no jobs anyhow, the teachers who had no jobs, the social workers who had no work, the nurses who had no work, that they could accompany so and so many for each train that left. They would accompany the children until they get to England. But once they got to England, they had to come back immediately. And they said, in other words, they couldn't stay there because imagine they were in freedom. You know, they were already in England. But they said if any one of them does not come back, the children's transport would stop immediately. So we had none of these people didn't go back. They couldn't. They all sacrificed the possibility that they could stay in England somewhere or another, find somebody or something. Of course, many of them had family at home too. It was just a job; they got paid for it, you know. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it was a remarkable thing, and quite a few of these people ended up in concentration camps because they couldn't get out. Because at that time it was already very difficult to get out. But they all sacrificed this, and that was the condition of the German. And you could only take one suitcase, and if any of the children took something that they weren't supposed to take, like valuables, you know, that the parents would give them, they would find that the parents would give them jewelry, valuable jewelry, or something else. Of course, some people did do it. They sewed it in their coats or something, I know. But some got away with it. But I mean, on the whole, they couldn't take anything. And that's how the children's transport started. Now, this organization, B'nai B'rith, contacted my parents because they were members in Berlin and they were members in England. They didn't know them. And they said, we will take one of your children. So my poor parents had to decide which one of the two do we send to safety. So my parents decided my brother, but it was right after the bar mitzvah. And my brother sometimes got into a little trouble, and I was as good as gold. I never did anything. So they decided they would send my brother.